Okay, so picture this. You're in Kolkata, right? Down by the Hooghly River, maybe late afternoon.
That golden light hits the water.
Exactly. That amazing glow on the old steps of the Ghats. You can almost smell the incense, hear the vendors, the river.
That gentle sound of water on the stone. It's incredibly atmospheric. Paints a real picture.
Totally. Like something right off a postcard, the whole City of Joy image.
It definitely evokes that. But beneath that beautiful surface, there's another story playing out.
A very different one.
Yeah, one that's less about shared joy and more about this really stark divide,
Hmm.
particularly along gender lines. It feels ancient, almost as old as the steps themselves.
And that's exactly what we're diving into today. It's not just about, pretty riverfronts in Kolkata.
No, it's much deeper.
We want to figure out who actually gets to use these iconic spaces freely, who gets kind of pushed to the margins, and honestly, why this is still such a big deal, even now in 2025.
Right. We're exploring how women have to navigate this whole complex web of like social rules, cultural pressures, sometimes just outright being excluded.
Just to do basic things, like fetching water or performing a religious ritual.
And when you think about it, this whole situation, it's really a microcosm, isn't it? It reflects broader issues you see everywhere.
Absolutely. Issues of public space, who gets access, equity, dignity. It resonates far beyond Kolkata.
It really makes you think about maybe the hidden divides in your own community, places you walk past every day.
Definitely. So let's get into it. These Ghats, they're more than just old stone steps, right?
Oh, much more. They are the absolute heartbeat of Kolkata. Life just unfolds there.
From dawn till dusk.
Yeah, morning baths, evening prayers, pujas, people doing laundry, folks having these intense debates about philosophy or politics.
What's where the city breathes.
It really is. But the key thing we found is that this heartbeat, this vibrant life, it's not shared equally. Not at all.
How so?
Well, women especially often find themselves sort of on the sidelines. They're balancing the water pots,
Yeah.
trying to manage their tasks, all while navigating these unwritten rules about where they can be and when.
Well,
The men often seem to operate with this like invisible VIP pass to the whole riverfront. There's a real sense of ownership.
we saw that firsthand. We spent some time watching Prinsep Ghat, one of the really famous ones, around 6 a.m.
Prime time.
Yeah, and it was buzzing. You see men bathing, praying, just hanging out, lounging around like they own the place.
Taking up the best spots often.
Exactly. And then you see the women, often huddled in specific corners, their movements almost dictated. Need water, you wait.
Right. Want to do your puja.
Right.
You might have to squeeze in somewhere less ideal, maybe further from the water because the prime spots are occupied.
Often by guys deep in a cricket debate or something.
Precisely. And it gets even tougher for women from, say, lower income backgrounds or marginalized caste groups like Dalits. Their presence can feel even more precarious. They might be relegated to less desirable, maybe less clean sections of the Ghat, almost invisible sometimes.
Wow. So this isn't something new that just cropped up.
Oh no, not at all. This gender divide, it seems baked into the very history of the Ghats. But what's striking is that even with Kolkata pushing its smart city image in 2025,
Right. All the modern development.
this very old pattern persists. Women are still navigating this tricky game, like a real-life snakes and ladders where social norms are the snakes constantly pulling them back down.
So how did it get this way? Let's look back a bit. The history seems key here.
Absolutely. These Ghats, many built during the British Raj, some even earlier, they were designed as hubs for trade, for transport, for religious activities.
The river was the city's lifeline back then.
It really was. But even in the 19th century, the access wasn't equal. Men dominated the commercial activities, the bigger religious ceremonies.
And the women.
Women were largely there for domestic duties, fetching water, washing clothes. Tasks essential for the household, but, seen differently, performed in the margins.
And that pattern just stuck.
It seems so. It's almost uncanny how closely the situation today mirrors that historical setup. We came across a 2018 study on water access in India,
Yeah.
and it basically confirmed that women, especially from marginalized groups, still shoulder the main responsibility for collecting water. They spend hours doing this.
Which translates into a real daily grind for women in Kolkata using the Ghats.
A total grind, waking up super early, like crack of dawn, to try and beat the rush, avoid the crowds of men at places like Gwalior Ghat or Bajakatam Talagat.
And it's not just inconvenient, it sounds physically hard.
It is. Carrying heavy pots,
Yeah.
navigating potentially slippery, uneven steps,
Yeah.
day in, day out. It takes a toll.
And it's not just about daily chores, right? These are sacred spaces, too.
Hugely important. Think about festivals like Chhath Puja. We saw that in November 2024, the city set aside 80 Ghats specifically for the rituals.
Okay, so they are making some provisions.
They are, but even within those designated spaces, the dynamic often repeats. Women performing the rituals often end up squeezed into the less convenient spots.
While the men get the prime riverfront real estate.
Often, yeah. It's like trying to pray peacefully while someone's practically doing cannonballs next to you.
So why? Why does this keep happening? It can't just be about who gets there first.
No, it's much deeper than just, physical space. It ties into culture, tradition, power. Fundamentally, how society views women's roles in public.
Let's unpack that. First off, these cultural norms, they seem pretty entrenched.
Very much so. In Kolkata, like much of India, anything water-related, fetching it, washing with it, rituals involving it, is largely seen as women's work.
That 2018 study you mentioned really hammered that home, didn't it?
It did. Over 80% of households without water piped in rely on women as the primary collectors. It's just expected.
But then paradoxically, at the very places they need to do this work, the Ghats, they're expected to defer to men.
Exactly. Men might be there just bathing or socializing, taking up the best, most accessible spots, while the women doing essential tasks have to wait or make do. It's a massive contradiction.
And you mentioned the design of the Ghats themselves.
Yeah, think about it. Historically, designed and maintained largely by men. Sometimes the less accessible sections, the poorly lit areas, the ones with crumbling steps, they implicitly become the women's zones. Inequality gets literally built into the infrastructure.
And for women facing other disadvantages, like poverty or caste discrimination.
It's like a double barrier. They face all the gendered issues, plus additional hurdles. They might be actively pushed towards the less maintained Ghats.
Like Gwalior Ghat, you mentioned.
Right. Known for its poor condition. But during big events like idol immersions, you might find women from lower income groups having to wade through polluted water there, while other, better maintained Ghats are implicitly or sometimes explicitly reserved.
That's awful. And then there's safety. That has to be a huge concern.
A massive one. Many Ghats just lack basic safety features. Poor lighting is common. No security presence. Forget about facilities like separate safe-changing areas.
So going there, especially at early morning or late evening, feels risky.
It can be, absolutely. It makes women vulnerable. It's frankly shocking that in a major city, basic things like a clean, safe toilet are often missing at such vital public spaces.
Especially after all the public discussion around women's safety in Kolkata, like after the RG car hospital case protests in 2024, you'd think this would be a priority.
You would hope so. It shouldn't require bravery just to fetch water or, say, a prayer by the river.
And the environmental angle, how does that play into the gender aspect?
Well, the pollution in the Hooghly is a serious problem for everyone, obviously. Think idle immersions releasing lead, chromium, all sorts of toxins.
Right.
But who relies on that river water most directly, day after day, for washing, for rituals, sometimes even drinking?
The women doing those women's tasks.
Exactly. So they bear the disproportionate health burden of that pollution. It's environmental injustice layered on to gender inequality.
Okay, this is all pretty heavy and frustrating, but sometimes you just have to see the sheer absurdity in it all, right?
Absolutely. Sometimes humor is the only way to process it. It helps to recognize the ridiculousness.
So let's paint a picture. Imagine a woman at, say, Baje Kadampalagat.
Okay.
She's got two massive water buckets, one on her hip, one in her hand. Her sari is slipping a bit on the wet steps. Her toddler just spotted a pigeon and is making a run for it.
Oh boy. High-stakes situation.
Totally. Olympic level, multitasking.
Yeah.
And like 5 feet away, there's a group of guys locked in this super intense debate.
Let me guess. Cricket.
Probably. Maybe Dhoni's retirement. Again, they're commanding the space, loud, passionate.
While she's performing this incredible feat of balance and domestic logistics completely unnoticed.
Exactly. The irony is just thick. In a movie, she'd get a slow-motion empowerment montage.
Huh. Real life offers fewer soundtracks.
And think about Chhath Puja again. You've got women deep in concentration performing these intricate rituals, standing knee-deep in the water.
Requires real focus, precision.
And then in the background, there's always that one guy seemingly trying to achieve the world's biggest splash, treating the sacred river like his personal water park.
While women are trying to have a spiritual moment, it's that clash of usage, that lack of awareness or respect for how others need to use the space. It's absurd, but yeah, also depressingly familiar.
So amidst all this, is anything actually being done? Are the authorities like KMC or KMDA trying to address it?
Well, yes and no. To be fair, there are efforts. Like we said, setting up those 80 Ghats for Chhath Puja in 2024 was something.
And they tried using metal tanks for immersion to cut down pollution?
Yeah, in some places. And they have tried to enforce bans on rituals at sensitive places like Rabindra Sarovar Lake,
Mhm.
citing the environment. That's been going on since around 2019.
Okay, so there's some action, but it sounds maybe not enough. Like you said, band-aids.
That's often how it feels. The scale of the problem, the overcrowding, the lack of basic facilities, the deeply ingrained gender norms. These initiatives don't always fundamentally change the daily experience for many women.
What's the missing piece then? Why isn't it translating?
That's the million rupee question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Look at the National Green Tribunal, the NGT. They've been raising alarms about Hooghly pollution for ages.
Right, the environmental court.
They've pushed for improvements, like at Nimtala Ghat, getting cranes and proper ramps for idle immersions to manage the waste better. That's progress.
Uh.
But then you look just downriver at Gwalior Ghat, still crumbling, still lacking basic facilities, still heavily used, especially by marginalized groups. And you wonder if these top-down directives actually reach everywhere equally. There seems to be a huge gap between policy and what happens on the ground.
And what about the gender side specifically? Kolkata has such a rich history of social reform, feminist movements.
Absolutely. From 19th century reformers to powerful modern activism, we saw the energy in the streets after the RG car case in 2024. Women are demanding change. They're speaking out.
So the will is there among the people.
The will is definitely there. But translating that activist energy into concrete changes in everyday spaces like the Ghats,
Yeah.
that seems to be happening at, let's just say, a very leisurely pace.
Like a Kolkata tram during rush hour, perhaps?
Something like that. It highlights this big challenge. How do you connect progressive ideals with the stubborn reality of how public spaces actually function day to day?
Okay, so if the current efforts aren't quite cutting it, what could work? What are some solutions that might actually, make a real difference? Concrete stuff.
Right, moving beyond just acknowledging the problem. One idea that comes up often, and seems quite practical, is creating designated women-only times or zones at the Ghats.
How would that work?
Well, maybe certain hours in the morning or specific, well-maintained sections are reserved just for women. It's not about permanent segregation, but ensuring they have dedicated safe periods or spaces to fetch water, perform rituals, whatever they need, without the usual jostling or intimidation.
Have other places tried this?
Yeah, cities like Varanasi have experimented with women-only bathing areas. There are precedents. It seems like a relatively straightforward way to guarantee some level of equitable access.
That makes sense. What else? Infrastructure has to be key.
Oh, absolutely crucial. The KMC really needs to invest seriously. Proper, bright lighting everywhere, clean, accessible, separate changing rooms, making sure the steps are non-slip and well-maintained, and seriously, accessible toilets.
It sounds so basic, but it would make a huge difference to dignity and safety.
Fundamental. Women shouldn't have to factor in bladder control or risk a fall just to use a public space.
What about safety beyond just infrastructure, like the social environment?
Good point. Empowering local communities can be powerful. Imagine local women's groups working with the police.
Like community policing.
Exactly. Having women from the community involved in monitoring the Ghats could help prevent harassment, make women feel safer, and ensure the space feels more welcoming and respectful for everyone. It's about community ownership of safety.
And the environment. Can't forget the polluted water.
Definitely not. Serious cleanup is needed. Investing properly in things like cranes and barges for immersions at all major Ghats, not just one or two. And really pushing, maybe even incentivizing, the use of eco-friendly materials for idols. Getting the lead and chromium out of the river is vital.
Because clean water benefits everyone, but especially the women using it daily.
Precisely. It's an environmental issue, but also very much a women's health and equity issue.
And finally, maybe getting creative about raising awareness.
Yeah, don't underestimate the power of that. Maybe street theater performances right there at the Ghats highlighting the dynamics, or funny, shareable social media videos.
Like the woman outsmarting the Ghat bros you joked about.
Exactly. Use humor, use relatable stories set to local music. Make the issue visible, make people think, maybe even laugh a little, but get them talking about the inequality. Sometimes that's how change starts.
So wrapping this up, it really feels like what's happening at Kolkata's Ghats isn't just a local issue.
Not at all. It's such a clear, potent symbol of the wider struggles for gender equality across India and frankly, in many parts of the world.
Women are almost half the population, yet in so many public arenas, from streets to workplaces to riverbanks, they're still fighting for equal space, equal access.
And in Kolkata specifically, a city with this incredible legacy of progressive thought, the birthplace of figures like Anandibai Joshi, one of India's very first female doctors.
Right, a city that prides itself on intellect and reform.
It feels particularly jarring, almost like a betrayal, to see women still being implicitly told to wait their turn or make themselves smaller in such fundamental public spaces.
The stakes feel really high when you put it like that.
They are. Access to water isn't a luxury. It's a basic human need. And the time women lose navigating unsafe, crowded, inadequate Ghats, that's time they can't spend on education or earning money or caring for their families or just living.
It reminds me of that old report, maybe U.S. Department of Commerce from way back in '98, talking about how lack of facilities and safety barriers hold women back economically in India.
Exactly. And here we are in 2025, and those same barriers are still firmly in place at the Ghats. It does feel like we're stuck competing the same scene, stuck in a bad sequel nobody asked for.
So a final thought for everyone listening. The next time you hear about Kolkata's Ghats, or maybe the next time you're just walking through any public space, wherever you are.
Take a second. Look around.
Yeah, consciously notice. Who's taking up the main space? Who seems most comfortable, most entitled to be there? And who is on the edges? Who seems hesitant or is navigating obstacles?
And ask yourself why. Why might that be?
And if you happen to see a woman, maybe balancing a heavy bucket, carefully stepping around a crowd, maybe managing a child at the same time, and she still somehow manages a smile.
Recognize what you're seeing. She's not just carrying water. She's carrying the weight of a system that is way, way overdue for a fundamental change.
The goal has to be Ghats and public spaces everywhere, where everyone, truly everyone, can stand tall, bucket or no bucket, without feeling like they have to fight for their simple right to be there.
If the City of Joy can make its spaces joyful for all its citizens, that would be a truly powerful statement.